Alright, time for a history lesson. You know the Macedonian Empire? The ever so slightly controversial one. We're not here to get into that. What if I told you that someone looked at it and went, "Let's make a game out of this"? Crazy. I know, but it's made by the same people behind the funny ghost game, so it has to be good, right? Get your pen and paper ready and let's take a look at the story of Alexander the Great. Secrets of Power. Wait, why does Alexander look like that? A long time ago, Alexander the Great conquered the Achaemenid Empire. But he wasn't happy with having taken out the strongest nation on earth at the time. When he reaches the Hyphasis River in India, he enters the temple of Shiva and demands the priest do a ritual to give him infinite power. The reluctant priest acquiesced and the whole thing goes sideways. Alexander overdoses on power, his crown is destroyed, and his entire bloodline gets cursed. Hang on, we're getting a bit sidetracked here. This was actually just a dream the protagonist had. What? You didn't think this game would take place in the past, did you? Speaking of the protagonist, there is a neat surprise waiting for him in the parcel he couldn't be bothered to open the other day. He received a letter from some dude named Oscar Horry, the vice president of the Rarity Foundation, inviting him to a study of the artifacts of Alexander as they suspect the protagonist is an heir of his. He is given a compass, a first-class ticket to Pella, Greece, €3,000, and the ring of the great conqueror himself. Upon putting it on, he has a vision of Alexander's mother, Olympias, performing a ritual that gave her son power over the dagger, ring and crown. I guess that settles it. It's off to Pella. After landing, we finally get to meet Oscar. He looked just like I had imagined. Anyway, he explains to the protagonist that a fresh out of jail criminal named Gregory, who is also a scion of Alexander, has just stolen the dagger and plans to kill any other of Alexander's descendants because the fewer there are, the stronger the remaining ones get. Don't ask me how that works. The plan is to perform a ritual in the temple to activate the ring's power to protect its wearer from any attack while Oscar tries to stall Gregory. Some unrelated puzzles later, the way to the temple is open. Oscar says nothing important and we're off to the same place we saw Olympias in like 2 seconds ago. Oscar calls again to inform the protagonist that Gregory is out and about to raise the stakes, and our hero discovers a notch in the wall with a crystal from Alexander's crown and a hole that looks perfectly ring-shaped. You'd better get used to the crystals being in our inventory for the whole game. Inserting the ring into it transports him to the past where he can actually perform the ritual. Everything goes swimmingly and now we have a powered-up ring. Side effects may include being able to understand Greek, French, German and Hindi, but it's totally worth it. Time to go out there and start this game for real. Oh. That's awkward. Roll credit. Never mind, he's not dead. Anyway, this is the fabled Gregory, here to commit homicide. But the ritual performed earlier pays off as Gregory promptly evaporates after trying to swing his dagger. Oscar shows up late to the party and draws the protagonist's attention to some document Gregory dropped on his way out. The first document is a report by Dwayne Richardson, leading archaeologist at Rarity Foundation, talking about the artifacts and suggesting getting in touch with Alexander's scions for help. The second is by museum director Jacob Greenlow, where he details hiring a well-known psychic to identify the 3 heirs of Alexander the Great. They faultlessly identified 2 of them, but when trying to examine the third he mumbled something about some dark forces and passed out. This incident left them without their powers. On their way to Gregory's hotel room, Oscar offers more insight on the criminal. After learning of the artifacts, He visited Richardson in Nemrud, and soon after, the latter had a heart attack and slipped into a coma. Gregory then seized the opportunity to rob the museum, stealing the dagger and the 2 documents. Somehow the protagonist was able to enter Gregory's hotel room, and it looks like he left a bit of a mess behind. Nothing really interesting happens. There's an old scroll in a safe that talks about unlocking the true potential of the artifacts, and Gregory's laptop has only one text file where his father tells him about his lineage and is basically like, "Hey son, this is our secret, so go take over the world." The psychic that identified the scions of Alexander drew an awesome piece of fan art that is surely not some kind of warning. Anyway, it's probably best to fly to the museum near Dublin in search for more clues. The protagonist is greeted by Jacob. Yeah, remember him. He arranged everything to help the protagonist, but is off to hear the news on Mr. Richardson's condition. Things are going great. Our hero finds an old document where Seleucus talks about the ritual we saw during the dream sequence at the beginning. Alexander lost his artifacts, and he was so distraught that he fell ill and died. This is totally how it happened in real life. What are you talking about? There is a crystal in the casket in the middle, but Oscar insists that there is more to see there. Indeed, there is. There are several scraps of paper that could maybe be put together. I mean, none of the documents have been helpful in pointing us to any direction so far, but what do I know? Right, maybe this one is. Oh, look, he's back. Jacob may or may not be having a stroke right now, so he needs our immediate attention. Except he refuses to let the protagonist call the doctors for help. Ah, so he's one of those people. He gives the protagonist the key to the safe in the vault that contains a set of needles and instructions for needle therapy. Yep, this is happening. After disinfecting the needles in the restoration room, it's time for acupuncture. It somehow works. I guess Jacob knows something that we don't. He has a hunch that he may have been poisoned by his newest employee and tells the protagonist a funny story about how she got extremely anxious when Jacob told her he was coming and she just left, on some pretense. I'm sure he can get to the bottom of this. What's important is that the protagonist can now enter the museum's minor hall where he finds a disc from Nemrud. Remember this disc. It will be important later. Having finally found the scraps, the protagonist restores the document. It's from Seleucus again. He gave one of the crystals he found to Olympias, another to Roxana, and 2 were left in his sanctuary in Nemrud. One of them was found by Richardson and given to the museum, meaning the other must still be there. Just when you thought that Oscar was going to do something, a volcano conveniently erupts and all the airports are closed. This means that the protagonist is left to solve a series of puzzles all by himself in the dark to open the door to the sanctuary. He finds and inserts 2 caducei in the middle pedestal and manages to get himself trapped inside. But at least part of a wall fell off and he can time travel to the past again, so it's not all bad. We get another flashback of Seleucus putting the crystal in the pedestal, and the protagonist finds the missing star from the puzzle on the wall in the present. The puzzle reveals a statuette and it also reopens the sanctuary door. The statuette opens the pedestal and voila! The crystal. The issue is that there is no lead as to where the other ones could be. But there is a solution. Count Saint-Germain from Eckernforde built a compass that might just help. Saint Germain's compass can sample an object and look for similar ones, pointing out their exact location. They can use this to pinpoint the locations of the remaining 3 crystals. So, without a moment to waste, the protagonist and Oscar split up and search the mansion. The instructions on how to assemble the compass are in the cellar, along with one of the pieces. The protagonist searches the rest of the house and manages to find 2 more. But the planets are still missing. The only place he hasn't searched is the big metal door in the cellar that requires 3 inverted triangles to open. Oscar tells him that Jacob mentions having him as exhibits from Eckernforde because of plot convenience, so I guess it's time to return to the museum. Hello there, random girl. Remember Jacob's newest employee, you know, the one that almost killed him? Yeah, that one. Her name is Denise. She is subbing in for Jacob because he isn't doing the best. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something seems very off about this girl. With her fake glasses, passive-aggressive remarks, and her offhandedly mentioning that she has the protagonist's phone number, or the fact that she didn't get fired for what she did. It's probably nothing. After the museum got robbed and its director almost dying, they finally decided to get better security, which the protagonist immediately shuts off. Don't worry, it's for a good cause. The protagonist tries to look for the triangles in the restoration room, but gets locked in as soon as he enters. He gets a phone call from an unknown number, and it turns out to be none other than Denise. I knew it. I knew those glasses were fake. She taunts the protagonist and, well, I think I'll just let this scene speak for itself. That escalated quickly. Unfortunately for Denise, the explosion revealed a secret door that leads to a vault, so she actually helped the protagonist. The vault has no signal, but it does have the 3 triangles. Better get back to Eckernforde before Oscar grows impatient. Okay, but seriously, how is this logical at all? A flight from Ireland to Germany is at least 2 hours, and I refuse to believe this small detour lasted less than a day. So you mean to tell me that Oscar was sat there at St. Germain's mansion, searching for however long this took? Ugh, this is what happens when I try to make sense of everything. Alright, no more beating around the bush. The protagonist unlocks the cellar door, finds St. Germain's secret laboratory, creates a solution that reveals invisible ink, and inputs a combination that opens the hatch on the floor that contains the planets. Finally, we spent way too much time for what is essentially a box full of balls of varying sizes. The protagonist calls Oscar inside and decides to give the compass a whirl while he is waiting. Upon touching it with the ring, it immediately gets to work and points to 3 locations: Hyphasis, the Sogdian Rock, and Alexandria. Great. That's the last 3 locations, now to tell Oscar and... Oh my god. Denise. Put the gun down. Jesus Christ. This game is rated E for everyone. Denise threatens to kill literally everyone if she doesn't get the crystals and the disc we worked so hard to get. The protagonist has no choice but to comply, and because he is an idiot, he blurted out that one of the crystals was at the Sogdian Rock. Did she just walk backwards into nothing? And seriously, why don't they just get law enforcement involved? Whatever, I guess it's good to know that Denise also has it out for the protagonist. Fun fact. If you paid attention to when I explained how the compass worked, you'd know that it samples objects and locates similar ones, meaning that the ring may be made from a crystal. Too bad this piece of information is nothing but trivia because screw world building, I guess. Enough tangents. There are 3 places to choose from. There is an order, that's all, but intended to do them in, and we're doing them in that specific order. The protagonist fixes the bridge leading to the fortress and enters a corridor. From there, a familiar voice calls out,
"Hey! Anybody! Help!"
My, how the tables have turned. She needs help. But the protagonist won't let himself get fooled. He wants everything she took away back in Eckernforde. I guess helping out an attempted murderer is a small price to pay for fulfilling your birthright. The slab won't open all the way, but there is enough room to pass items from one end to the other. The room Denise is trapped in has a window she could jump out of. So she requests her equipment that she misplaced in the adjacent hall. Why she didn't think to carry it on her person is beyond me. One extremely awkward trade later, and the high stakes built up in the previous chapter are completely gone. I love storytelling. Like every other bad guy, Denise swears that they would meet again. Just call the police already. Well, time to look for the crystal that's actually here. It's been a while since we've last time traveled. So the protagonist gets transported from the ruins to a room, Rixana's room. There is another flashback where a young Seleucus gives Rixana the second crystal, indicating that it should be here. Long story short, it isn't. The only important things there are a note from Alexander, where he entrusts Rixana to keep his artifacts from falling into the wrong hands, and a combination for the door to the treasury. I'll give you 3 guesses to figure out where the crystal is. The protagonist has to get past a gate, a swinging pendulum and arrows to get to the dragon and open up its gob. Our work here is done. The fresco on the beach shows that the location of the crystal is in an ancient temple that has now been completely submerged. So the protagonist finds some diving gear conveniently sitting there and heads underwater. He navigates the depths collecting hexagonal tablets and comes across the remnants of the temple. He inserts the hexagons and goes down to the pagoda. I question how this place isn't completely submerged considering the hatch lead down and not up. But oh well. After the protagonist learns how to use layers, the door opens and reveals Alexander's bust, wearing the crown and one of the crystals being the real deal. Taking the crystal causes the cavern to begin collapsing, blocking the entrance. Thankfully, part of the wall fell off and revealed a weird door that leads back out to the beach through the fresco. Oscar is still useless, and the protagonist is off to India. We're finally here, the cursed and haunted temple of Shiva. The front door has an inscription that alludes to an heir of the Great One obtaining absolute power, after the sacrifice of other heirs. But more importantly, we finally get to use the disc that's been sitting in our inventory for over an hour of gameplay to do whatever this is. The temple itself has nothing going on at the moment, we'll come back to it later. The protagonist creates a special bait for termites so they can eat the roots of a tree blocking the way to a pagoda. The pagoda is where the last crystal is and Oscar claims that the crown must be in temple. Hey, cool reference. Where was I? Right. After this puzzle, the statue rings the very long bells and the crown finally shows itself in all its glory. The protagonist inserts the 6 crystals and the one and only Denise returns. At this point, I'm convinced that she can just teleport. How could she have come from the front? she reveals that she was the third scion of Alexander this entire time. The one the psychic lost their powers over. What a twist. Okay, I can't even act surprised, this was painfully obvious. She tries to take the crown, but evaporates. I guess this is the last we'll be seeing of her. Goodbye, Denise, you were the de facto main villain of this game. Since Denise graciously sacrificed herself to Shiva, the protagonist is safe to take the crown. Oscar tells him to activate the crown's power like he did the rings back in Pella, but can't come with because he has the flu. They're really going through every excuse in the book to write Oscar out of the story, huh? A thunderstorm sets an intense atmosphere for the last leg of our journey as the protagonist hurries inside to perform the ritual. After placing the crown on the altar, Gregory appears. Honestly, you'd be forgiven for not remembering he existed. A very boring boss fight ensues, and because Gregory is a sore loser, he decides to destroy the crown if he can't have it. Doing so also kills him. Gazing upon the broken crown he has worked so hard for, the protagonist has one last vision where the Indian priest warns him of the impending cataclysm. What a joyful note to end things on. If you are a free-to-play pleb like me, then you would get an alternate vision where Alexander the Great simply thanks the protagonist. Not a very clever marketing strategy in my opinion. Usually you'd want people to pay for the good ending, unless it's opposite day. Roll credits. So, after all this, I know what we're all thinking. What the hell just happened? I mean, where do I even begin with this? The amount of killing people in this game is alarming, and why did they not get the police involved? They claim it's because Gregory has the dagger and can pretty much go on a killing spree whenever he pleases, but why not try to arrest Denise? She's got nothing. Why not at least try? I guess it's obvious by the alternate ending that this game does indeed have a paid version that includes the hotel room and Alexandria's chapters, which definitely explains the lack of story in them. Well, I guess I can say that I've never seen a story underutilize its characters so much. And it did not, in fact, live up to the legacy of the funny ghost game. Sigh. If only. Well, I guess now it's as good a time as ever to actually read up on Alexander the Great, because this game does not teach you anything. Bye.